From the moment you were born, invisible rules were written for you. Go to school. Get a stable job. Follow the crowd. Don't question too much. Fit in. But what if those rules were never meant for you? What if the life you've been chasing isn't truly yours, but a version designed by society, family expectations, and fear? Deep down, you already feel it. That quiet voice telling you there's more. More freedom. More truth. More you. This book is not about rebellion for the sake of chaos. It's about awakening. It's about reclaiming your right to think, choose, and live on your own terms, without guilt, without approval, and without limits. You don't need permission to live your life. You need courage, and this book will help you find it. Welcome to Great Learner Audiobook. This audiobook, Your Life, Your Rules, Break Society's Expectations and Live Freely, is written and published by Great Learner Audiobook. Chapter 1, The Invisible Script. There is a script you've been following your entire life, and no one ever handed it to you. No teacher sat you down and said, "Here's how you should live." No parent gave you a printed manual. No friend ever admitted, "We're all just repeating what we've been told." And yet somehow you've been moving through life as if there were rules already written, rules about what success looks like, what happiness should feel like, and who you're supposed to become. This is the invisible script. It's the quiet voice in your head that says, you should be further ahead by now. It's the pressure you feel when you compare your life to someone else's timeline. It's the guilt that creeps in when you want something different from what everyone around you expects. You didn't create this script, but you've been living by it. From a young age, you were taught, directly or indirectly, what is considered right. Go to school. Get good grades. Choose a safe career. Work hard. Settle down. Follow the path. Don't question too much. Don't stand out too much. Don't fall behind. At first, it all seems harmless, logical even. But over time, something begins to feel off. You start chasing things that don't excite you. You start making decisions that don't feel like yours. You start building a life that looks good on the outside, but feels empty on the inside. And the most dangerous part, you don't even realize it. Because the invisible script doesn't feel like control. It feels like normal. You see, society doesn't need to force you to follow its rules. It simply teaches you to believe that those rules are your own. That's how powerful conditioning is. It doesn't just shape your actions, it shapes your identity. You begin to think, this is just who I am. But what if it's not? What if the version of you that you've been living is only a reflection of expectations you never chose? Think about the goals you're chasing right now. Are they truly yours? Or are they borrowed from what you've seen, heard, and been told your entire life? Maybe you're pursuing a career because it's respectable. Maybe you're staying in a relationship because it's comfortable. Maybe you're holding back your real dreams because they seem unrealistic. And deep down, there's a quiet voice whispering, there has to be more than this. That voice is real. And it matters. But here's the truth most people never face. Breaking free from the invisible script isn't easy. Because the moment you start questioning it, you also start questioning everything, your choices, your beliefs, even your sense of self. It can feel uncomfortable, confusing, even scary. Because if the script isn't real, then what is? That's where your power begins. You don't need to have all the answers right now. You don't need to completely rewrite your life overnight. But you do need to become aware. Awareness is the first step toward freedom. Start noticing the patterns. Notice when you say yes when you really want to say no. Notice when you follow the crowd instead of your instincts. Notice when fear of judgment stops you from being honest about what you truly want. These moments are clues. They show you where the script is still controlling you. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's the turning point. Because the invisible script only works when it stays invisible. The moment you begin to question it, it starts to lose its power. You start to realize that there is no universal timeline you must follow. There is no single definition of success you must achieve. There is no fixed identity you must stick to for the rest of your life. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to choose differently. You are allowed to create your own rules. But before you can do that, you must give yourself permission. Permission to pause. Permission to reflect. Permission to ask yourself a simple but powerful question. Is this the life I truly want, or the life I was told to want? This question can change everything. Because when you start answering it honestly, you begin to separate your true self from the version shaped by expectations. You begin to see where you've been living on autopilot and where you're ready to take control. And that's where your real journey begins. Not the journey of becoming who the world expects you to be, but the journey of becoming who you actually are. The invisible script may have guided you up until now. It may have shaped your decisions, your beliefs, and your direction. But it does not define your future. You are not locked into a path. You are not behind. You are not stuck. You are simply waking up. And once you wake up, everything changes. You begin to understand that life is not about fitting into a pre-written story. It's about writing your own, line by line, choice by choice, moment by moment. This chapter is not about rejecting everything you've ever learned. It's about becoming conscious of what you've been following blindly. It's about taking a step back and realizing that you have more control than you think. Because the truth is, most people will live their entire lives without ever questioning the script. They will follow it from beginning to end, never realizing that they had the power to change it. But you're different. You're here. You're reading or listening to this for a reason. Something inside you is ready for more. Ready for freedom. Ready to live life on your own terms. And that starts right here. With awareness. With honesty. With the courage to question what you've always accepted as normal. The script may be invisible, but you are not. And from this moment on, you don't have to live unconsciously anymore. You get to choose your life, your rules. Chapter 2. Breaking the Approval Trap. There's a quiet addiction that controls more lives than failure ever could. It's not money. It's not comfort. It's not even fear. It's approval. The need to be liked. The need to be accepted. The need to be seen as good enough in someone else's eyes. At first, it feels harmless. After all, we're human. We want connection. We want belonging. We want to feel valued. But somewhere along the way, that natural desire turns into something much heavier, something that begins to control your choices. You stop asking, "What do I want?" and start asking, "What will they think?" That's the approval trap. It doesn't look like a trap from the outside. In fact, it often looks like success. You're polite, responsible, easy to like. You do what's expected. You avoid conflict. You try not to disappoint anyone. People praise you for it. But inside, there's tension. Because every time you silence your truth to keep someone else comfortable, a part of you shrinks. You say yes when your heart says no. You agree when you actually disagree. You follow paths that feel safe instead of paths that feel right. And slowly, without realizing it, your life becomes a performance. You play the role others expect. You say the lines that keep the peace. You wear the version of yourself that gets the most approval. But here's the hard truth. A life built on approval is a life that doesn't belong to you. Because approval is unpredictable. One person will support you, another will question you. One group will applaud you, another will criticize you. No matter what you do, someone will always have an opinion. And if your choices are based on pleasing everyone, you will always feel torn. This is where most people get stuck. They believe that if they just try harder, be nicer, work more, say the right things, they will finally earn enough approval to feel secure. But it never ends. Because the approval you're chasing is not stable. It shifts with people, situations, and expectations. And the more you depend on it, the less control you have over your own life. Think about it. How many times have you held back your opinion because you didn't want to be judged? How many times have you changed your plans to avoid disappointing someone? How many times have you chosen comfort over honesty just to keep others happy? These moments may seem small, but they add up. They shape your direction. They shape your identity. They shape the life you end up living. And one day, you may wake up and realize that you've spent years trying to be everything for everyone, except yourself. That realization can be painful, but it can also be powerful. Because once you see the trap, you have a choice. You can keep living for approval, or you can start living for truth. Breaking the approval trap doesn't mean you stop caring about people. It doesn't mean you become rude, selfish, or disconnected. It means you stop making other people's opinions the center of your decisions. It means you start trusting yourself. That's where the real shift happens. You begin to understand that not everyone needs to agree with you. Not everyone needs to like your choices. Not everyone needs to understand your path. And that's okay, because your life is not a group project. You are the one who has to wake up every day and live with your decisions. You are the one who has to carry the consequences of your choices. You are the one who has to face yourself in the mirror. So why should someone else's approval have more power than your own truth? This is where courage comes in. Not loud, dramatic courage, but quiet, steady courage. The courage to say no when it's easier to say yes. The courage to speak honestly when silence feels safer. The courage to choose differently, even when others don't understand. At first, it will feel uncomfortable. You might feel guilty. You might feel judged. You might even feel like you're doing something wrong. That's normal, because you've spent so much time being rewarded for pleasing others that choosing yourself can feel unfamiliar. But unfamiliar does not mean wrong. It means you're growing. And here's something important to remember. People who are used to the old you may resist the new you. They may question your choices. They may misunderstand your intentions. They may even try to pull you back into old patterns. Not because they want to harm you, but because change makes people uncomfortable. Especially when your change reminds them of the choices they're not making. But this is your moment to stay grounded. You don't need to argue. You don't need to explain everything. You don't need to prove your worth. You simply need to stand by your truth. Because the more you do, the stronger your self-trust becomes. And something powerful begins to happen. You stop chasing approval and start attracting respect. There's a difference. Approval is given when you fit in. Respect is earned when you stand firm in who you are. When you stop bending yourself to match everyone else's expectations, people begin to see you differently. They may not always agree with you, but they will recognize your confidence, your clarity, and your authenticity. And more importantly, you will feel it within yourself. You will feel lighter, more aligned, more at peace. Because for the first time, your choices will come from a place of honesty, not fear. That's freedom. Not the kind of freedom where everything is perfect, but the kind where you are no longer controlled by the need to be accepted. You become free to express your thoughts, free to follow your path, free to be fully, unapologetically yourself. And that changes everything. Breaking the approval trap is not a one-time decision. It's a practice. A daily commitment to choose truth over comfort, to choose self-respect over external validation. Some days will be easier than others, but every time you choose yourself, even in the smallest way, you take another step toward the life you actually want to live. A life that reflects your values, your desires, your voice, not someone else's expectations. So the next time you feel that pull, the urge to seek approval, to fit in, to avoid judgment, pause for a moment. Take a breath and ask yourself, am I doing this to be accepted or because it's true for me? Your answer will guide you. Because deep down, you already know what feels right. You've just been taught to ignore it, but not anymore. This is your chance to break free, to stop performing, to stop pretending, to stop living for approval, and start living for yourself. Because at the end of the day, the only approval that truly matters is your own. Chapter 3. The Fear of Being Judged. There's a moment that stops more dreams than failure ever could. It's not when you try and fall. It's not when you lose money. It's not even when things go wrong. It's the moment before you begin, when a single thought quietly takes over. What will people think? That question has more power than most people realize. It can silence your voice before you speak. It can stop your ideas before they're shared. It can shrink your confidence before it even has a chance to grow. This is the fear of being judged. And it doesn't always show up in obvious ways. Sometimes it's subtle. It hides behind hesitation, overthinking, and delay. You tell yourself you'll start tomorrow. You say you're not ready yet. You convince yourself that you need more time, more skills, more certainty. But underneath all of it is fear. Not fear of failure, fear of exposure. Because when you step out and do something real, something meaningful, you make yourself visible. And being visible means opening yourself up to opinions. Some will support you, some will ignore you, and some will judge you. That possibility alone is enough to keep many people stuck. You start imagining the worst. What if they laugh? What if they don't take me seriously? What if I embarrass myself? These thoughts feel real, heavy, convincing. But here's what you need to understand. Most of the judgment you fear never actually happens. And the little that doesn't matter as much as you think. People are too busy living their own lives, dealing with their own insecurities, thinking about their own problems. The spotlight you feel on yourself, it's mostly in your mind. But even if someone does judge you, what then? Will it stop your life? Will it define your future? Will it take away your ability to grow? No. Judgment is not the end of your story. It's just noise. But when you let that noise control you, it becomes a cage. You begin to hold yourself back. You avoid speaking up in conversations. You avoid sharing your ideas online. You avoid trying new things where you might be seen as a beginner. And slowly, your world becomes smaller. Not because you lack potential, but because you're trying to protect yourself from something that can't truly harm you. That's the real cost of this fear. It doesn't protect you. It limits you. Think about all the things you've wanted to do, but didn't. The opportunities you passed on. The risks you avoided. The dreams you kept to yourself. How many of them were held back by the fear of judgment? Now imagine a different version of your life. A version where you spoke freely. Where you acted boldly. Where you didn't shrink yourself just to stay safe. That version of you is not out of reach. But to become that person, you need to change how you see judgment. Right now, it feels like a threat. But what if it's actually a sign? A sign that you're stepping outside your comfort zone. A sign that you're doing something visible, something real. A sign that you're no longer hiding. Because the truth is, people who do nothing rarely get judged. It's the ones who try, who create, who express themselves. Those are the ones who get noticed. And yes, sometimes that includes criticism. But it also includes growth, respect, opportunities, impact. You can't have one without the other. If you want to live freely, you have to be willing to be seen. And if you're willing to be seen, you have to accept that judgment will come. Sometimes fair, sometimes not. But here's the shift that changes everything. Not all judgment is equal. Some opinions come from people who have walked the path, who understand the struggle, who offer insight that can actually help you grow. But many opinions come from people who are projecting their own fears, their own doubts, their own limitations. And if you let every voice have power over you, you'll lose your own. So you have to choose carefully. Whose opinion truly matters? Is it the stranger scrolling past your content? Is it the person who never took a risk but criticizes those who do? Is it the voice that doubts you but has never tried what you're attempting? Or is it the part of you that knows what you're capable of? This is where your focus needs to shift. From external voices to internal clarity. Because confidence doesn't come from avoiding judgment. It comes from understanding that judgment doesn't define you. You define you. And the more you act in alignment with what feels right to you, the less power other people's opinions will have. At first, it won't be easy. You might still feel nervous. You might still hesitate. You might still hear those old thoughts in your head. But here's the difference. You won't let them stop you. You'll move forward anyway. You'll speak even if your voice shakes. You'll share even if it's not perfect. You'll try even if there's a chance of failure. Because you'll realize something powerful. The regret of not trying is far heavier than the fear of being judged. Years from now, you won't remember every opinion someone had about you. But you will remember the chances you didn't take, the moments you stayed silent, the life you could have lived. And that's not a weight you want to carry. So instead of asking, what will people think? Start asking a better question. What will happen if I don't do this? That question shifts your focus from fear to possibility. It reminds you that your life is not meant to be lived in the shadows of other people's opinions. It's meant to be experienced fully, honestly, and boldly. Yes, some people may judge you. but others will be inspired by you. Some will relate to you. Some will find courage because you chose to show up. And most importantly, you will respect yourself because you chose to live truthfully instead of safely. That's what freedom looks like. Not the absence of judgment, but the ability to move forward despite it. So step out. Be seen. Be heard. Be real. Let people think what they want. Because at the end of the day, their opinions are just that, opinions. But your life, that's something much bigger. And it's yours to live. Chapter 4. Unlearning what you were taught. Before you can truly live life on your own terms, there's something important you need to understand. Not everything you learned was meant to serve you forever. Some lessons helped you grow. Some kept you safe. Some gave you direction when you needed it. But others quietly limited you. They shaped how you think, how you see the world, and what you believe is possible for your life. And the most powerful part is this: you didn't question them. You accepted them as truth. That's how conditioning works. It doesn't ask for your permission. It simply repeats ideas until they feel real. Be realistic. Don't take too many risks. Stay within your limits. People like us don't do things like that. These phrases may sound normal, even caring, but over time, they create invisible boundaries in your mind. Boundaries that define what you think you can do, what you believe you deserve, and how far you're willing to go. And once those boundaries are set, you stop exploring beyond them. Not because you can't, but because you've been taught not to. This is why unlearning is so important. Because growth is not just about adding new knowledge. It's also about removing what no longer fits who you're becoming. Think about it this way. If your mind is filled with outdated beliefs, new ideas have no space to grow. You can read all the books, watch all the videos, listen to all the advice, but if you're still holding on to limiting thoughts, nothing truly changes. You don't need more information. You need a mental reset. And that starts with awareness. Begin by looking at the beliefs you've been carrying. Not the obvious ones, but the quiet assumptions that guide your decisions. Do you believe success is only for certain people? Do you believe you have to struggle constantly to deserve something better? Do you believe that changing your path means you failed? These beliefs don't come from nowhere. They were built over time, through experiences, through environment, through what you saw and heard growing up. But here's the truth. Just because you were taught something doesn't mean it's true. And more importantly, it doesn't mean it has to define your future. Unlearning is not about blaming the past. It's about reclaiming your present. It's about recognizing that you now have the ability to choose what you believe, how you think, and what direction your life takes. But let's be honest, this process isn't easy. Because what you've learned feels familiar. It feels safe. It feels like part of who you are. And when you start questioning it, you may feel resistance. You might think, what if I'm wrong? You might feel unsure, even lost. That's normal. Because you're stepping away from certainty and moving toward possibility. And possibility always feels uncertain at first. But here's something powerful to remember. Everything you now see as normal was once unfamiliar. Every belief you hold today was once something you learned. Which means you can learn something new. You can replace limitation with expansion. You can replace fear with curiosity. You can replace doubt with belief. But it requires intention. You have to actively question what you've accepted passively. For example, if you've always believed that you need permission to do something, ask yourself, who decided that? If you've always believed that failure is something to avoid, ask yourself, what if failure is actually part of growth? If you've always believed that you should follow a certain path, ask yourself, is that path truly mine? These questions are not meant to confuse you. They're meant to free you. Because every time you challenge an old belief, you weaken its hold on you. And slowly, something new begins to take its place. Clarity. You begin to see that many of the limits you thought were real were just learned patterns. And patterns can be changed. This is where transformation begins. Not in big, dramatic moments, but in quiet shifts in how you think. You start making decisions based on possibility instead of habit. You start seeing opportunities where you once saw obstacles. You start trusting that you can figure things out, even if you don't have all the answers. And with each shift, your world expands. You begin to realize that life is not fixed. It's flexible. The rules you thought were permanent can be rewritten. The path you thought you had to follow can be changed. The version of yourself you thought you had to stay can evolve. This is the power of unlearning. It gives you space. Space to think differently. Space to choose differently. Space to become someone new. But there's one more thing you need to understand. Unlearning is not about rejecting everything you've been taught. It's about choosing what still serves you and letting go of what doesn't. Some lessons will stay. Some values will remain. But others will fade, and that's okay. Because you are not meant to stay the same. You are meant to grow. And growth requires change. So don't be afraid to question your beliefs. Don't be afraid to outgrow old ways of thinking. Don't be afraid to step into a mindset that feels unfamiliar. That discomfort, it's a sign that you're expanding. It means you're no longer confined by what you were taught. You're creating what you believe. And that changes everything. Because once you realize that your thoughts are not fixed, your life stops feeling fixed too. You stop seeing limits as permanent. You stop seeing yourself as stuck. You stop believing that your future has already been decided. Instead, you begin to see possibilities. And that's where true freedom begins. Not in escaping the world, but in changing how you see it. So take a moment. Look at the beliefs you've been carrying. Ask yourself which ones still serve you and which ones are holding you back. And then slowly, intentionally begin to let go. Not all at once, not perfectly, but honestly. Because the life you want to live is not waiting for you to learn more. It's waiting for you to release what's been holding you back all along. And once you do, you won't just think differently. You'll live differently. On your terms. Chapter 5. Redefining success on your terms. At some point in your life, you were given a picture of what success is supposed to look like. It probably looked clean, predictable, impressive, a good job, a steady income, a nice home, recognition, stability, maybe even a certain kind of lifestyle that others admire. And without even realizing it, you started chasing that picture. Not because you deeply questioned it, but because it was presented as the standard, the goal, the destination. But here's the question most people never stop to ask. What if that version of success isn't yours? What if you've been running toward a finish line that doesn't actually fulfill you? This is where everything begins to shift. Because success is not a universal definition. It's a personal one. And until you define it for yourself, you will always feel like you're chasing something that's slightly out of reach, slightly disconnected, slightly empty. You might achieve things that look impressive on the outside, yet feel unfulfilled on the inside. You might hit milestones that others celebrate, yet feel no real sense of joy. You might be doing well, but not feeling well. That's the cost of living someone else's definition of success. It creates a life that looks right, but doesn't feel right. So let's pause for a moment. Forget everything you've been told about success. Forget the expectations, the comparisons, the social standards, and ask yourself a simple but powerful question. What does success actually mean to me? Not what sounds good, not what looks good, but what feels right. Maybe success for you is freedom, having control over your time, your energy, your choices. Maybe it's peace, waking up without stress, without pressure, without constantly feeling behind. Maybe it's growth, becoming better, stronger, wiser, without needing external validation. Maybe it's impact, helping others, creating something meaningful, leaving a mark that matters. Or maybe it's something completely different. That's the point. Your version of success is allowed to be unique. It doesn't need to match anyone else's. Because the moment you define success based on your truth, everything changes. Your goals become clearer. Your decisions become easier. Your direction becomes more aligned. You stop chasing everything and start focusing on what truly matters. But here's where many people struggle. They feel guilty for wanting something different. They think, what if my definition of success doesn't impress others? What if people don't understand my choices? What if I'm seen as less ambitious? This is where you need to be honest with yourself. Are you living your life to impress others? or to fulfill yourself. Because those two paths are very different. One leads to constant pressure, comparison, and external validation. The other leads to clarity, peace, and internal satisfaction. And you cannot fully walk both at the same time. Redefining success requires courage. The courage to step away from expectations. The courage to let go of comparison. The courage to trust that your path is valid, even if it looks different. Because the truth is, there is no single way to live a successful life. Some people find success in building businesses. Some find it in raising families. Some find it in creative expression. Some find it in simple living. None of these are more correct than the other. What matters is alignment. Does your life reflect what matters to you? Does your daily routine support the kind of life you want to live? Do your goals excite you or just impress others? These are the questions that bring clarity. Because success is not just about outcomes. It's about experience. It's about how you feel while you're building your life. If you're constantly stressed, drained, and disconnected, is that really success? If you're achieving goals but losing yourself in the process, is that worth it? Only you can answer that. And your answer matters more than any external standard. Now, this doesn't mean your version of success will always be easy. It may require hard choices. You may have to walk away from things that look good but don't feel right. You may have to say no to opportunities that don't align with your values. You may have to face uncertainty while creating your own path. But here's the difference. When you're working toward your own definition of success, the effort feels meaningful. The challenges feel worth it. The journey feels authentic. The progress feels real. Because you're not just moving forward, you're moving in the right direction. And over time, something powerful happens. You stop comparing your life to others. Because you realize you're not playing the same game. You're not chasing the same goals. You're not measuring success the same way. So comparison loses its grip. And in its place, something stronger grows. Confidence. Not loud, attention-seeking confidence, but quiet, grounded confidence. The kind that comes from knowing you're living in alignment with yourself. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to explain everything. You don't need to compete with anyone. You simply live your life on your terms. That's real success. And it's not something you find at the end of a long journey. It's something you create through the choices you make every day. The way you spend your time. The way you use your energy. The way you prioritize what truly matters. So take a moment and reflect. What are you currently chasing? And why? Is it coming from your truth or from external pressure? Because once you become honest about that, you gain clarity. And clarity gives you direction. From there, you can begin to redefine your goals. Not based on what looks impressive, but based on what feels meaningful. Not based on what others expect, but based on what you truly want. And slowly, step by step, you begin to build a life that reflects your definition of success. A life that feels right, not just looks right. A life that fulfills you, not just impresses others. A life that you are proud to live because it's truly yours. So don't be afraid to redefine success. Don't be afraid to choose differently. Don't be afraid to walk a path that others may not understand. Because at the end of the day, success is not about reaching someone else's destination. It's about creating your own. And once you do, you won't just feel successful. You'll feel free. Chapter 6. The Courage to be Different. There comes a moment in life when you realize something simple, yet powerful. If you keep doing what everyone else is doing, you will keep getting what everyone else is getting. Average results. Predictable outcomes. A life that feels safe, but not truly alive. And deep down, something inside you resists that. You don't just want to exist. You don't just want to follow. You don't just want to blend in. You want more. Not more in terms of status or attention, but more in terms of meaning, depth, and authenticity. But here's the challenge. The moment you decide to be different, you step outside the comfort of the familiar. And that takes courage. Because being different is not always celebrated, at least not at first. At first, it feels uncomfortable. You notice the gap between you and others. You feel the weight of standing alone in your choices. You question whether you're making the right move. Because the world is designed to reward sameness. It's easier to follow patterns that already exist. It's easier to agree than to question. It's easier to stay within boundaries than to step beyond them. But easy doesn't always mean fulfilling. And deep down, you know that. Being different means thinking differently. It means questioning ideas that most people accept without thought. It means exploring paths that are not clearly defined. It means choosing what feels right to you, even when it doesn't match what others are doing. And that can feel lonely. Because when you step away from the crowd, you lose the comfort of constant validation. You're no longer surrounded by people who mirror your choices. You're no longer moving in the same direction as everyone else. Instead, you're creating your own direction. And that requires trust. Trust in yourself. Trust in your vision. Trust in your ability to figure things out along the way. But here's the truth most people don't talk about. Every person you admire for being unique once felt uncertain too. Every innovator, every creator, every individual who stood out had a moment where they felt different, unsure, even misunderstood. The difference is they didn't turn back. They kept going. Not because they had all the answers, but because they were willing to follow their own path, even without certainty. That's courage. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. And when you choose to be different, you begin to unlock something powerful within yourself. You begin to discover who you really are. Not the version shaped by expectations, not the version designed to fit in, but the version that is authentic, raw, and real. And that version has a voice, a perspective, a way of thinking, a way of living that cannot be replicated. But it only comes out when you stop trying to be like everyone else. Think about it. If you constantly adjust yourself to match the crowd, how will you ever know what makes you unique? If you always follow existing paths, how will you ever create your own? If you keep shrinking your ideas to fit in, how will you ever expand into your full potential? Being different is not a weakness. It's your greatest strength. Because it's where creativity lives. It's where innovation begins. It's where real change happens. But to access that strength, you have to stop seeing different as something to avoid and start seeing it as something to embrace. Yes, people may not always understand you. Yes, your choices may seem unusual to others. Yes, you may face moments of doubt. But none of that defines your path. What defines your path is your commitment to it. And the more you commit, the more clarity you gain. At first, the road may feel unclear. But as you keep moving, it begins to take shape. You learn. You adapt. You grow. And slowly, what once felt uncertain begins to feel natural. Because you're no longer trying to fit into someone else's mold. You're creating your own. This is where real confidence begins. Not from approval. Not from comparison. But from alignment. You feel it when your actions match your beliefs. When your choices reflect your values. When your life starts to feel like it truly belongs to you. And that feeling is worth everything. Because it brings a sense of freedom that cannot be replaced. Freedom to express yourself. Freedom to explore your ideas. Freedom to live without constantly looking over your shoulder for validation. But remember, courage is not a one-time decision. It's something you practice daily. Every time you choose your own path over the expected one. Every time you speak your truth instead of staying silent. Every time you take a step forward despite uncertainty. You strengthen that courage. And over time, it becomes part of who you are. You no longer see being different as risky. You see it as necessary. Because you understand that the life you want, the life that feels real, meaningful, and fulfilling, cannot be built by following someone else's blueprint. It has to be created by you. So don't be afraid to stand out. Don't be afraid to think differently. Don't be afraid to walk a path that others may not fully understand. Because the goal is not to fit in. The goal is to become. To become someone who lives with intention. Someone who trusts themselves. Someone who is not afraid to be seen for who they truly are. That's where your power is. And it's been there all along. Waiting for you to stop holding back and start stepping forward. So take that step. Even if it feels small. Even if it feels uncertain. Even if it feels different. Especially if it feels different. Because that's not a sign you're going the wrong way. It's a sign you're finally going your way. Chapter 7. Letting Go of Social Conditioning. There are forces shaping your life that you don't see. Not because they're hidden, but because they've always been there. They live in everyday conversations, in what people praise and what they criticize, in what gets labeled as normal and what gets labeled as different. Over time, these influences form something powerful. Social conditioning. It's the system of beliefs, behaviors, and expectations that quietly tells you how to think, how to act, and how to live without ever asking if it truly fits you. And the most surprising part, you don't feel controlled by it. You feel guided by it. Because social conditioning doesn't force you. It shapes you. It shows you what's accepted, and your mind naturally moves toward it. It shows you what's rejected, and you instinctively avoid it. Without realizing it, you begin to adjust. You align your choices with what's familiar. You avoid paths that seem too far outside the norm. You filter your thoughts before expressing them. And slowly, your life becomes a reflection of what you've absorbed, not what you've consciously chosen. That's how deep this goes. It's not about one big decision. It's about thousands of small influences that quietly guide your direction. What kind of lifestyle you believe is right? What kind of risks you think are acceptable? What kind of life you think is possible for you? These ideas don't appear out of nowhere. They are shaped by the world around you, your environment, your culture, your surroundings. And while some of these influences can be helpful, many of them create invisible limits. Limits on your thinking. Limits on your behavior. Limits on your potential. The problem is not that these limits exist. The problem is that you don't question them. You assume they're just the way things are. But what if they're not? What if many of the rules you've been following are simply patterns passed down from one generation to the next? Patterns that were never meant to be permanent. Patterns that may have made sense in a different time, but no longer serve you now. This is where letting go begins. Not by rejecting everything around you, but by becoming aware of what you've been unconsciously accepting. Start by observing your reactions. Notice what feels wrong or unusual to you. Ask yourself, why does this feel that way? Is it truly harmful or just unfamiliar? Notice what you automatically agree with. Ask yourself, do I actually believe this, or have I just heard it enough times to accept it? These questions open a door that leads to clarity. Because once you start examining your beliefs, you begin to see where they came from. And once you see that, you realize something powerful. You are not obligated to carry every belief you were given. You are allowed to choose. This is where your freedom begins, not in changing the world around you, but in changing your relationship with it. Instead of absorbing everything automatically, you begin to filter consciously. You decide what aligns with you and what doesn't. You keep what supports your growth. You release what limits your potential. And that release is not always easy. Because social conditioning is tied to familiarity. It feels comfortable. Even when it holds you back, it feels known. And stepping away from what's known can feel uncertain. You might feel like you're losing your sense of direction. You might feel disconnected from what others expect of you. You might even question yourself. But this is not confusion. This is transition. It's the space between who you were taught to be and who you are becoming. And in that space, something important happens. You start thinking for yourself, not based on what's popular, not based on what's expected, but based on what feels true to you. That shift changes everything. Because once you begin to think independently, your choices begin to change. You stop following paths just because they're common. You stop limiting yourself based on what others consider realistic. You stop defining your life based on external standards. Instead, you begin to create your own standards. Standards that reflect your values, your goals, your vision. And with that comes a new level of clarity. You no longer feel pulled in every direction. You no longer feel pressured to fit into molds that don't suit you. You no longer feel restricted by invisible rules. You feel free. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. Now, it's important to understand something. Letting go of social conditioning does not mean isolating yourself from society. It doesn't mean rejecting people or disconnecting from your environment. It means engaging with the world consciously. It means choosing your beliefs instead of inheriting them. It means participating in life without being controlled by it. You can still be part of society without losing yourself in it. And that balance is powerful because it allows you to move through life with awareness. You see patterns without being trapped by them. You hear opinions without being defined by them. You experience the world without being limited by it. And from that place, you can build something real. A life that reflects your truth. Not a life shaped by pressure, but a life guided by clarity. Not a life based on imitation, but a life based on intention. And that kind of life feels different. It feels lighter, more aligned, more meaningful. Because every choice you make comes from a place of awareness, not habit. That's what makes it yours. So take a moment and reflect. What beliefs have you been carrying without question? What expectations have you been following without thought? What limits have you accepted without realizing it? And then ask yourself, do these still serve the life I want to live? If the answer is no, you have permission to let them go. Not all at once, not perfectly, but intentionally. Because every belief you release creates space. Space for new ideas. Space for new possibilities. Space for a new version of you. And that version is not defined by conditioning. It's defined by choice. Your choice. So don't be afraid to step beyond what you've been taught. Don't be afraid to think differently. Don't be afraid to create your own way of living. Because the life you want is not found within the limits of social conditioning. It's found beyond it. And once you step there, you don't just live differently. You live freely. Chapter 8. Silencing the Inner Critic. There's a voice inside your head that knows exactly what to say to stop you. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need attention. It simply whispers at the right moment, and everything slows down. You're not ready. You're not good enough. What if you fail? What makes you think you can do this? That voice is your inner critic. And for most people, it sounds convincing. Not because it's always right, but because it's familiar. You've heard it for so long that it feels like truth. It shows up when you're about to take a step forward. It appears when you try something new. It gets louder when something actually matters to you. And over time, it becomes a filter. Before you act, it evaluates. Before you speak, it judges. Before you try, it doubts. And if you're not careful, it becomes the reason you stay where you are. But here's something important to understand. Your inner critic is not your enemy. It's a learned voice. A voice shaped by past experiences, past mistakes, past feedback, and moments when you felt uncertain or judged. At some point, your mind created this voice to protect you, to keep you from making mistakes, to keep you from feeling embarrassment, to keep you from stepping into situations where you might get hurt. But protection can turn into limitation, because instead of guiding you, the inner critic starts controlling you. It keeps you small. It keeps you safe. But it also keeps you stuck. And the more you listen to it without question, the stronger it becomes. So the goal is not to completely eliminate this voice. The goal is to change your relationship with it. Right now, you treat it like authority. When it speaks, you believe it. But what if you started seeing it differently? What if, instead of accepting every thought it produces, you began to question it? Because not every thought you have is true. Some are habits. Some are assumptions. Some are outdated beliefs that no longer serve you. And your inner critic is often built on those. So the next time that voice speaks, pause. Don't react immediately. Instead, ask yourself, is this actually true? Or is this just a pattern? This simple question creates space. Space between the thought and your response. And in that space, you gain power. Because now you have a choice. You can believe the thought, or you can challenge it. For example, when your inner critic says, "You're not good enough," ask, based on what? What evidence supports that claim? What experiences contradict it? You'll often realize that the voice is generalizing, exaggerating, or focusing only on your weaknesses while ignoring your strengths. That's what it does. It looks for flaws and magnifies them. But you don't have to accept that view. You can balance it. You can remind yourself of what you've done, what you've learned, and how far you've come. Not in a way that inflates your ego, but in a way that grounds you in reality. Because confidence is not about believing you're perfect. It's about understanding that you're capable of learning, growing, and improving. And that's something your inner critic often forgets. Another powerful shift is changing how you speak to yourself. Right now, your inner dialogue may be harsh, critical, and unforgiving. You make a mistake and immediately judge yourself. You fall short and immediately feel disappointed. You try something new and immediately doubt your ability. But imagine if you spoke to yourself the way you would speak to someone you care about. Would you constantly criticize them? Would you remind them of their flaws every time they tried? Would you tell them they're not good enough? Of course not. You would encourage them. You would support them. You would remind them that growth takes time. So why not offer that same understanding to yourself? This is where self-compassion comes in. Not as weakness, but as strength. Because when you treat yourself with understanding instead of judgment, you create an environment where growth becomes possible. You're no longer afraid to try. You're no longer paralyzed by the fear of making mistakes. You're no longer controlled by the need to be perfect. You become willing to move forward, even if it's not flawless. And that's where real progress happens. Now, silencing the inner critic doesn't mean it will disappear overnight. It will still show up. It will still try to speak. But the difference is you won't let it lead. You'll hear it, but you won't follow it blindly. You'll acknowledge it, but you won't be controlled by it. Over time, its voice becomes quieter. Not because it's gone, but because your confidence becomes louder. Your belief in yourself grows stronger. Your trust in your ability to handle challenges increases. And slowly the balance shifts. From doubt to belief. From hesitation to action. From fear to growth. This is the transformation. Not a sudden change, but a steady shift in how you think, how you respond, and how you see yourself. And as this shift happens, something powerful begins to unfold. You start taking chances you once avoided. You start expressing yourself more freely. You start stepping into opportunities without overthinking every possible outcome. Because you're no longer waiting to feel perfect. You're willing to move forward as you are. And that's what freedom looks like. Not the absence of doubt, but the ability to move beyond it. So the next time your inner critic speaks, don't let it define you. Listen, but question. Hear, but don't obey. Notice, but don't believe everything it says. Because that voice is not your truth. It's just a part of your past trying to shape your present. But you are not your past. You are who you choose to become. And every time you challenge that voice, every time you choose action over doubt, every time you respond with strength instead of fear, you take back control. You reclaim your voice, and you move one step closer to the life you truly want. So don't aim to silence the inner critic completely. Aim to rise above it. Because when you do, its whispers lose power, and your life gains momentum. Chapter 9. Choosing freedom over comfort. There's a quiet trade most people make without even realizing it. They trade freedom for comfort. Not all at once. Not in one big decision. But slowly over time, through small choices that feel easy, safe, and familiar. You choose what's comfortable instead of what's challenging. You stay where it's predictable instead of where it's uncertain. You hold on to what you know instead of stepping into what you don't. And at first, it feels right. Comfort feels good. It feels stable. It feels secure. There's no pressure. No risk. No fear of the unknown. But here's the truth that most people avoid. Comfort can quietly become a cage. It keeps you in places that no longer excite you. It keeps you in routines that no longer grow you. It keeps you in situations that feel okay, but not fulfilling. And the longer you stay in that space, the harder it becomes to leave. Because comfort creates attachment. You get used to things as they are, even if they're not what you truly want. You tell yourself, it's not that bad. You convince yourself, maybe this is enough. You settle into a life that feels manageable, but not meaningful. That's the cost of choosing comfort over freedom. Freedom, on the other hand, feels very different. It's not always easy. It's not always predictable. It doesn't come with guarantees. Freedom requires movement. It asks you to step into uncertainty. It asks you to take risks. It asks you to leave behind what feels safe in order to discover what feels true. And that's where most people hesitate. Because the unknown can feel intimidating. What if it doesn't work out? What if I make the wrong choice? What if I lose what I already have? These questions are natural. But they're also rooted in fear. Fear of change. Fear of loss. Fear of stepping into something unfamiliar. And while that fear is understandable, it often leads you back to comfort. Back to what's known. Back to what's easy. Back to what feels safe but limiting. So the question becomes, what matters more to you? Temporary comfort or long-term freedom? Because you can't fully have both at the same time. Comfort keeps you where you are. Freedom requires you to move. Comfort avoids risk. Freedom embraces growth. Comfort feels easy now. Freedom creates a better future. And the choice between the two shapes your entire life. Now, choosing freedom doesn't mean making reckless decisions. It doesn't mean abandoning everything overnight or taking unnecessary risks. It means being honest with yourself. It means recognizing when you're staying somewhere, not because it's right, but because it's comfortable. It means noticing when fear is the only thing holding you back. And then making a different choice. A choice that aligns with growth, even if it feels uncomfortable. Because discomfort is not something to avoid. It's something to understand. Discomfort is a sign that you're stepping outside your zone. It's a signal that you're stretching, learning, evolving. Every meaningful change begins with discomfort. Starting something new. Leaving something behind. Making a decision that challenges your current situation. None of it feels easy in the beginning. But over time, that discomfort transforms. It turns into confidence. It turns into strength. It turns into a new level of freedom. And once you experience that freedom, everything changes. You realize that the things you once feared were not as limiting as you thought. You realize that you are capable of more than you gave yourself credit for. You realize that the life you wanted was always on the other side of that initial discomfort. But you had to be willing to step through it. This is where courage plays a role. Not loud, dramatic courage, but quiet, consistent courage. The courage to make decisions that align with your truth. The courage to take action even when you're unsure. The courage to trust that you can handle whatever comes next. Because here's the reality. There will always be uncertainty. No matter what path you choose, there will be risks. Even staying in your comfort zone carries a risk. The risk of regret. The risk of wondering, what if I had tried? The risk of feeling stuck in a life that never fully satisfied you. And that risk is often greater than the fear of change. So instead of asking, what if things go wrong? Ask a better question. What kind of life am I creating if I don't change? That question brings clarity. Because it shifts your focus from fear to consequence. It helps you see that staying comfortable is not a neutral choice. It's a decision with long-term effects. And once you see that, you begin to think differently. You start valuing growth over ease. You start choosing progress over. You start moving toward freedom, one step at a time. Not all at once. Not perfectly. But intentionally. Maybe it starts with a small decision. Speaking up when you would normally stay silent. Trying something new instead of sticking to routine. Taking a step toward a goal you've been delaying. These small shifts matter. Because each one builds momentum. Each one proves to you that you can handle discomfort. Each one moves you closer to the life you actually want. And over time, your tolerance for discomfort grows. What once felt difficult becomes manageable. What once felt impossible becomes achievable. And eventually, you reach a point where you no longer fear discomfort. You expect it. You understand that it's part of growth. You welcome it as a sign that you're moving forward. That's when freedom becomes your new standard. Not comfort. Freedom to choose your path. Freedom to make decisions that align with your values. Freedom to live without constantly being held back by fear. And that kind of freedom is worth everything. Because it allows you to live fully. Not just safely, not just predictably, but meaningfully. So take a moment and reflect. Where in your life are you choosing comfort over growth? Where are you staying the same because it feels easier? Where is fear of the unknown keeping you from something better? And then ask yourself, am I willing to stay here, or am I ready to move? Because the life you want is not found in what's comfortable. It's found in what challenges you to grow. So don't run from discomfort. Step into it, not because it's easy, but because it leads somewhere greater, toward freedom. Your life, your rules. Chapter 10, The Power of Saying No. There is a single word that can completely change the direction of your life. A simple word, a short word, a powerful word. No. And yet, for many people, it's one of the hardest words to say. Not because it's complicated, but because of what comes with it. The fear of disappointing someone. The fear of being misunderstood. The fear of being seen as rude, selfish, or difficult. So instead of saying no, you say yes. You say yes when you're tired. You say yes when you're overwhelmed. You say yes when something doesn't feel right. And each time you do, you give away a small part of your control. Because every yes you say to something that doesn't align with you is a no to something that does. A no to your time. A no to your energy. A no to your priorities. That's the hidden cost. At first, it may seem like you're just being helpful, kind, or cooperative. But over time, it turns into something else. You become stretched too thin. You feel drained, even when you haven't done anything for yourself. You lose clarity about what truly matters because you're constantly responding to what others want. And slowly, your life starts to feel crowded. Not with things you chose, but with things you accepted. This is where the power of saying no becomes essential. Because saying no is not about rejecting people. It's about protecting yourself. It's about creating space in your life for what actually matters. It's about deciding that your time, your energy, and your focus are valuable and not something to be given away without thought. But here's the challenge. You've been conditioned to believe that saying no is negative, that it creates conflict, that it damages relationships, that it makes you less likable. So you avoid it. You soften your answers. You delay your responses. You agree first and regret it later. But what if saying no is not something to avoid, but something to master? Because when used correctly, no is not harsh. It's honest. It's clear. It's respectful to yourself and to others. Think about it. When you say yes to something you don't want to do, are you really being honest? Or are you just trying to avoid discomfort in the moment? That kind of yes may feel easier at first, but it often leads to frustration later. On the other hand, a clear no may feel uncomfortable in the moment, but it creates long-term clarity. People know where you stand. You know where you stand. There's no confusion, no hidden resentment, no internal conflict. That's the power of it. Now, saying no doesn't mean you become closed off or unhelpful. It means you become intentional. You don't respond automatically. You don't agree out of pressure. You don't accept everything that comes your way. Instead, you pause. You think. You ask yourself, does this align with my priorities? Do I actually have the time and energy for this? Is this something I truly want to do? And based on that, you decide. Sometimes the answer will be yes. But when it's no, you say it. Without over-explaining. Without feeling guilty. Without trying to justify your decision to everyone. Because you don't need permission to protect your own boundaries. That's something many people struggle with. They feel the need to explain every no. To give long reasons. To make it sound acceptable. To soften it so much that it barely feels like a no at all. But real boundaries don't need constant explanation. A simple, respectful no is enough. I can't commit to that right now. That doesn't work for me. I need to focus on something else. Clear, direct, honest. Here's something important to understand. The people who truly respect you will respect your no. They may not always like it, but they will understand it. Because healthy relationships are built on honesty, not constant agreement. On the other hand, people who only value you when you say yes may struggle when you start saying no. They may question you. They may push back. They may try to make you feel guilty. But that reaction is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to stay true to yourself. Because every time you ignore your own limits to satisfy someone else, you move further away from the life you actually want to live. And over time, that distance grows. So saying no is not just about individual situations. It's about direction. It's about making sure your life is shaped by your choices, not by constant external demands. And when you begin to use this power, something shifts. You feel more in control, more focused, more aligned. Because your time is no longer scattered across things that don't matter. It's invested in what does. Your goals, your growth, your well-being. And that creates a sense of balance that many people never experience. Now, let's be honest, saying no will never feel completely easy. There will always be moments of discomfort, moments where you hesitate, moments where you feel pressure, moments where you second-guess yourself. But each time you choose to stand by your decision, it becomes easier. Each time you respect your own boundary, your confidence grows. Each time you prioritize your life, your clarity strengthens. And over time, saying no becomes less about resistance and more about alignment. You're not pushing things away. You're making room. Room for what truly matters. Room for what truly fulfills you. Room for a life that reflects your values. So the next time you feel that pressure to say yes, pause. Take a breath and ask yourself, am I saying yes because I want to or because I feel I have to? That question will guide you. Because your life is not meant to be filled with obligations that drain you. It's meant to be shaped by choices that empower you. And sometimes, the most powerful choice you can make is to simply say no. Not out of negativity, not out of rejection, but out of respect. Respect for your time, respect for your energy, respect for your life. Because when you learn to say no with clarity and confidence, you don't lose opportunities. You gain control. And that control is what allows you to live freely. On your terms. Chapter 11. Living without apology. Somewhere along the way, you learn to shrink yourself. Not in obvious ways. Not all at once. But slowly, quietly, in moments that seem small at the time. You apologize for speaking too much. You apologize for taking up space. You apologize for wanting more, for choosing differently, for simply being yourself. I'm sorry. It became automatic. You said it when you didn't need to. You said it to avoid tension. You said it to make others comfortable, even when you were the one feeling uncomfortable. And over time, this habit did something deeper than you realized. It taught you that your presence needed permission, that your voice needed approval, that your choices needed justification. But here's the truth. You were never meant to live your life as an apology. You were never meant to walk through your own story feeling like you need to explain, defend, or minimize who you are. Living without apology doesn't mean you stop being kind. It doesn't mean you ignore your mistakes. It doesn't mean you become careless or insensitive. It means you stop apologizing for things that don't require an apology. There's a difference. If you hurt someone, take responsibility. If you make a mistake, own it. If you cross a line, acknowledge it. That's maturity. But apologizing for your existence, for your boundaries, for your dreams, for your truth, that's where the problem begins. Because every unnecessary apology sends a message to yourself and to others. It says, I don't fully believe in my right to be here as I am. And the more you repeat that message, the more it becomes your identity. You start second-guessing your words. You start doubting your decisions. You start holding back your true self. Not because you lack confidence, but because you've trained yourself to step back, to soften, to adjust, to fit into expectations that were never meant to define you. Living without apology is about breaking that pattern. It's about standing in your truth without constantly feeling the need to make it acceptable to others. It's about understanding that your life is not something you have to justify. Think about how often you downplay yourself. You achieve something and say, it's not a big deal. You share an idea and say, this might sound stupid, but you express a need and say, sorry to bother you. These phrases may seem harmless, but they carry weight. They reduce your presence. They weaken your voice. They make you appear unsure, even when you're not. And over time, they shape how others perceive you and how you perceive yourself. So what happens when you stop? When you stop apologizing unnecessarily, something shifts. You begin to speak with more clarity. You begin to act with more confidence. You begin to show up without constantly questioning your worth. Not because you become someone new, but because you stopped holding yourself back. That's the power of it. But let's be honest, this change doesn't happen overnight. Because the habit of over-apologizing is often rooted in deeper patterns. The desire to be liked, the fear of conflict, the need to avoid rejection. These patterns don't disappear instantly, but they can be replaced. It starts with awareness. Notice when you say sorry, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, is this apology necessary or is it automatic? If it's necessary, give it sincerely. If it's not, replace it. Instead of sorry I'm late, you might say, thank you for waiting. Instead of sorry to bother you, you might say, I have a question. Instead of sorry, this might be wrong, you might say, here's my perspective. These small changes may seem simple, but they are powerful because they shift your language from apology to confidence. And language shapes mindset. The more you speak with clarity, the more you begin to feel it. The more you express yourself without hesitation, the more natural it becomes. And slowly, you start to realize something important. You don't need to apologize for being yourself. You don't need to apologize for having opinions. You don't need to apologize for taking up space. You don't need to apologize for choosing a life that feels right to you. That realization is freeing because it removes the constant pressure to adjust. It allows you to exist without shrinking, to speak without filtering every word, to live without constantly seeking acceptance. And that doesn't push people away. In fact, it often does the opposite. When you show up as your authentic self, clear, honest, unapologetic, you attract people who respect you for who you truly are, not for the version you've been trying to present. Because authenticity creates connection, real connection, the kind that doesn't require you to pretend, the kind that doesn't require you to constantly adjust, the kind that allows you to be fully yourself. And that's what makes it meaningful. Now, living without apology also means accepting that not everyone will agree with you. Not everyone will understand your choices. Not everyone will support your path. And that's okay. Because your goal is not to be approved by everyone. Your goal is to be aligned with yourself. And when you are aligned, you don't need constant validation. You don't need to explain every decision. You don't need to defend every step. You simply live with clarity, with confidence, with self-respect. That's what it means to live without apology. Not arrogance, not indifference, but quiet strength. The kind that comes from knowing who you are and standing by it. So the next time you feel the urge to apologize unnecessarily, pause, take a breath, and remind yourself, I have the right to be here. I have the right to speak. I have the right to choose my life. And from that place, respond. Not with hesitation, not with doubt, but with certainty. Because your life is not something you need to apologize for. It's something you are meant to own, fully, boldly, honestly. And once you start doing that, you don't just feel more confident. You feel free. Chapter 12, Building Your Authentic Identity. At some point in life, a powerful question begins to rise within you. Who am I really? Not the version shaped by expectations. Not the version influenced by others. Not the version you've been presenting to fit in. But the real you. The honest you. The authentic you. This question doesn't come from confusion. It comes from awakening. Because after everything you've explored so far, you begin to realize something important. You are not just discovering yourself. You are creating yourself. Your identity is not fixed. It's not something you were given at birth and must carry forever. It is something you build, choice by choice, action by action, belief by belief. But here's the challenge. Most people never build their identity consciously. They inherit it. They adopt labels, roles, and expectations from the world around them. And over time, those things become who they believe they are. I'm not confident. I'm just an average person. I'm not the kind of person who does that. These statements feel real, but they are not facts. They are conclusions formed over time, based on experiences, patterns, and repetition. And what has been learned can be changed. That's where your power lies. Building your authentic identity starts with letting go of fixed labels, because labels can limit you. They box you into a version of yourself that feels permanent, even when it's not. When you say, "This is just who I am," you stop growing. But when you say, "This is who I've been and I can evolve," everything opens up. You move from limitation to possibility. So instead of asking, "Who am I?" start asking, "Who do I want to become?" This shift is powerful because it puts you in control. It allows you to design your identity instead of accepting it. Now, this doesn't mean creating a fake version of yourself. It means uncovering and strengthening what already feels true to you. Your values, your interests, your strengths, your natural way of thinking and expressing. These are the building blocks of your authentic identity. But they only become clear when you take time to understand yourself. So slow down. Pay attention to what energizes you. Notice what drains you. Observe what feels aligned and what feels forced. Your reactions are clues. They show you what resonates with you and what doesn't. And the more you listen, the more clarity you gain. Another important part of building your identity is taking responsibility. Because identity is not just about what you think. It's about what you do. You can say you want to be confident, but if your actions don't reflect that, the identity doesn't stick. You can say you want to be disciplined, but if your habits don't support that, it remains an idea. Identity is built through action. Every time you act in alignment with the person you want to become, you strengthen that identity. You prove to yourself that it's real. Not in theory, but in practice. For example, if you want to become someone who is confident, start acting in small ways that reflect confidence. Speak clearly. Stand with presence. Express your thoughts without hesitation. You don't need to feel fully confident first. The feeling follows the action. This is where many people get stuck. They wait to feel ready before they act. But identity doesn't work that way. You become ready by acting. You become confident by showing up. You become disciplined by staying consistent. You become authentic by expressing yourself honestly, step by step, moment by moment. And over time, those actions form patterns. Those patterns form habits. Those habits form identity. That's the process. Now, building your authentic identity also requires honesty. You have to be real with yourself. Not just about your strengths, but about your weaknesses too. Not in a way that criticizes you, but in a way that helps you grow. Because ignoring your challenges doesn't help you. Facing them does. When you acknowledge where you need to improve, you create an opportunity to evolve. And that evolution becomes part of your identity. You become someone who grows, not someone who avoids. Another key part of authenticity is consistency, not perfection. Consistency. You don't need to get everything right every time. You don't need to be perfect in every situation. But you do need to show up consistently as the person you want to become. Even on difficult days. Even when it feels uncomfortable. Even when progress seems slow. Because identity is not built in big moments. It's built in small, repeated actions. The way you think. The way you respond. The way you carry yourself daily. And the more consistent you are, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, what once felt like effort becomes who you are. That's when your identity becomes solid. Not because it's fixed, but because it's aligned. Aligned with your values. Aligned with your choices. Aligned with your truth. And that alignment creates confidence. Not forced confidence, but real, grounded confidence. The kind that doesn't depend on external validation. Because you know who you are. You've built it. You've lived it. You've proven it to yourself. And that makes it unshakable. Now, here's something important to remember. Your identity will continue to evolve. You are not meant to stay the same forever. As you grow, your perspective changes. Your goals shift. Your understanding deepens. And your identity adapts with it. That's not inconsistency. That's growth. So don't try to lock yourself into one version of who you are. Allow yourself to evolve. Allow yourself to explore. Allow yourself to become more. Because authenticity is not about staying the same. It's about staying true through change. So take a moment and reflect. Who are you becoming? Not based on what others expect. Not based on what feels safe. But based on what feels real. Because the life you want to live starts with the identity you choose to build. And that identity is not something you wait for. It's something you create every single day, through your thoughts, through your actions, through your choices. So build it with intention. Build it with honesty. Build it in a way that reflects your truth. Because when your identity is authentic, your life becomes aligned. And when your life is aligned, you don't just exist. You live fully, confidently, freely, on your terms. Chapter 13, Escaping the Comparison Game. There is a silent habit that steals more peace than failure ever could. It doesn't make noise. It doesn't announce itself. But it quietly shapes how you see yourself every single day. It's comparison. You scroll through someone's life and suddenly yours feels smaller. You see someone's success and suddenly yours feels slower. You hear someone's story and suddenly yours feels less important. And just like that, your confidence shifts. Not because your life changed, but because your perspective did. That's the power of comparison. It doesn't just show you others, it makes you question yourself. Am I doing enough? Am I moving fast enough? Am I good enough? These questions feel real. They feel urgent. But they are often based on incomplete information. Because when you compare, you're not seeing the full picture. You're seeing highlights, the best moments, the visible achievements, the polished version of someone's journey. But you don't see their struggles. You don't see their doubts. You don't see the effort, the setbacks, the quiet failures behind the scenes. And yet, you compare your entire reality to their selected moments. That's not a fair comparison. But your mind doesn't always recognize that. It simply reacts. It tells you that you're behind. It tells you that you should be further ahead. It tells you that others are doing better than you. And slowly, this pattern begins to affect how you feel about your own life. You start to overlook your progress. You start to undervalue your efforts. You start to lose satisfaction in what you've built because it doesn't look like someone else's version. That's the trap. Comparison shifts your focus away from your own path and places it on someone else's. And the more you do it, the more disconnected you feel from your own journey. But here's the truth. Your life is not meant to be measured against someone else's. You are not on the same timeline. You are not working with the same circumstances. You are not driven by the same values. So why use the same standard? This is where you begin to break free. By understanding that comparison is not a requirement, it's a habit. And like any habit, it can be changed. The first step is awareness. Notice when you compare. Notice how it makes you feel. Notice what thoughts follow. Do you feel motivated or discouraged? Do you feel inspired or insecure? Because not all comparison is harmful. Sometimes seeing someone else succeed can push you to grow. But when comparison turns into self-doubt, it becomes a problem. That's when you need to shift your focus. Instead of looking outward, look inward. Instead of asking, how do I measure up? Ask, am I growing? That question changes everything. Because growth is personal. It's not about being ahead of someone else. It's about being better than you were before. And when you focus on that, comparison loses its power. You start measuring your progress based on your own journey. What have you learned? What have you improved? What steps have you taken? These are the things that matter, not where someone else is. Another powerful shift is understanding that everyone moves at a different pace. Some people find success early. Some take longer to figure things out. Some change directions multiple times. There is no fixed timeline. There is no universal schedule, and believing that you're behind is often based on comparing your timeline to someone else's. But your timeline is yours. It reflects your experiences, your choices, your path, and it doesn't need to match anyone else's to be valid. So instead of rushing to catch up, slow down and focus on moving forward. At your pace, in your direction, with your purpose. That's where real progress happens. Now let's talk about something deeper. Comparison often comes from a lack of clarity. When you're unsure about your own path, it's easy to look at others for direction. You think, maybe I should be doing what they're doing. You start adjusting your goals based on what looks successful. But this leads to confusion. Because you're not following your path, you're chasing someone else's. And that never leads to fulfillment. So instead of copying what others are doing, take time to understand what matters to you. What kind of life do you want to build? What kind of work excites you? What kind of growth feels meaningful? When you have clarity, comparison fades. Because you're no longer distracted by what others are doing. You're focused on your own direction. And that focus is powerful. It keeps you grounded. It keeps you consistent. It keeps you aligned. Even when others move faster, even when others achieve more, you stay centered. Because you know where you're going. And that creates confidence. Not loud, competitive confidence, but quiet, steady confidence. The kind that comes from trusting your path. Now, this doesn't mean you stop observing others. You can still learn from them. You can still be inspired. But instead of comparing, you appreciate. You recognize their journey without questioning your own. You learn without losing your identity. You grow without feeling less. That's the difference. Comparison drains you. Appreciation expands you. So choose wisely. Because your energy matters. Where you place your attention shapes how you feel and how you move forward. If you constantly look at others, you lose sight of yourself. But when you bring your focus back to your own life, everything becomes clearer. You see your progress. You recognize your effort. You value your journey. And that creates a sense of peace, a sense of contentment. Not because everything is perfect, but because you're no longer measuring your life against someone else's. You are living it fully, on your terms. So the next time you feel that urge to compare, pause, take a breath, and remind yourself, their path is theirs, mine is mine, and then return to your journey. Because the life you want is not found by competing with others. It's found by committing to yourself, your growth, your direction, your truth. And once you do that, comparison loses its hold, and you gain something far more valuable. Freedom. Chapter 14, Trusting Your Own Voice. There is a voice inside you that has been speaking your entire life. Not the loud one shaped by fear. Not the critical one filled with doubt. But a quieter, steadier voice. The one that knows. The one that feels right, even when you can't fully explain why. The one that nudges you in a certain direction, even when it doesn't make sense to others. That is your voice. Your inner guidance. And for a long time, you may have ignored it. Not because it wasn't there, but because other voices felt louder. The voices of opinions. The voices of advice. The voices of expectations from people around you. Do this. Don't do that. This is the right way. That won't work. At some point, it becomes overwhelming. So instead of listening inward, you start looking outward. You ask for opinions before making decisions. You seek reassurance before taking action. You rely on others to tell you what's right for your life. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin to disconnect from your own voice. You stop trusting it. You start doubting your instincts. You second-guess your choices. You hesitate even when something feels right. Because you've been trained to believe that others know better. But here's the truth. No one knows your life better than you do. No one understands your thoughts, your desires, your experiences the way you do. And while advice can be helpful, it should never replace your own judgment. Because your life is not something others have to live. You do. And that means your voice matters. More than you've allowed it to. Trusting your own voice doesn't mean you have all the answers. It doesn't mean you'll never make mistakes. It doesn't mean you ignore everything around you. It means you listen to yourself first, before the noise, before the opinions, before the pressure. It means you pause and ask, what feels right to me? Not what looks right, not what sounds logical to others, but what truly aligns with you. At first, this may feel unfamiliar because you're not used to relying on your own judgment. You may feel unsure. You may question yourself. You may wonder if you're making the right choice. That's normal. Trust is not built instantly. It's built over time, through experience, through action, through learning. And the only way to build that trust is to start using it. Start making decisions based on your own understanding, even small ones. What you want, what you need, what direction you feel drawn toward. And then a follow through. Because trust is not just about listening. It's about acting. Every time you act on your own voice, you send a message to yourself. I trust me. And that message builds confidence. Not the kind that depends on certainty, but the kind that grows from self-reliance. You begin to realize that even if things don't go perfectly, you can handle it. You can adjust. You can learn. You can move forward. And that realization removes fear. Because the fear was never really about making the wrong choice. It was about not trusting yourself to deal with the outcome. But once you trust yourself, that fear loses its power. Now, let's talk about something important. Your voice will not always be loud. It won't always come with clear answers. Sometimes it will show up as a feeling. Quiet pull. A sense of knowing that something is right or not right. And in those moments, you have a choice. You can ignore it or you can honor it. Ignoring it may feel easier because it allows you to follow what's expected. It keeps things simple. It avoids uncertainty. But over time, ignoring your voice creates distance. Distance between who you are and how you live. And that leads to confusion. You feel lost, disconnected, unsure of what you truly want. But when you start honoring your voice, even in small ways, you begin to reconnect. You feel more aligned, more clear, more grounded, because you are no longer moving based on external direction. You are moving based on internal truth, and that changes everything. Your decisions become more authentic. Your actions become more intentional. Your life begins to reflect who you really are. Now, trusting your voice also requires patience. You won't always get it right. There will be moments where you misjudge, moments where you doubt, moments where things don't go as planned. But that's part of the process, because trust is not about being perfect. It's about being willing to learn from your own experiences. Every decision teaches you something. Every step gives you clarity. And over time, your voice becomes stronger, not because it changes, but because you start listening more closely. You understand it better. You recognize it faster. You respond to it with confidence. And eventually, something powerful happens. You stop needing constant reassurance. You stop looking for approval before making choices. You stop depending on external validation to feel secure. Because you have something stronger. Self-trust. The ability to stand by your decisions. The ability to move forward without constant doubt. The ability to live in alignment with yourself. And that is freedom. Not freedom from uncertainty, but freedom from hesitation. Freedom from constantly questioning your worth. Freedom from relying on others to define your path. So the next time you feel unsure, I'll pause. Take a breath and listen. Not to the noise around you, but to the voice within you. It may be quiet, but it's there, guiding you, supporting you, leading you toward the life that feels true to you. And the more you trust it, the stronger it becomes, the clearer your path becomes, and the more confident you become in living your life, not based on what others say, but based on what you know, deep down, because your voice is not something you need to find. It's something you need to trust. And once you do, you don't just make better decisions. You live with certainty, with clarity, with purpose, on your terms. Chapter 15, Designing a Life You Love. At some point, a powerful realization begins to take shape. Your life is not something that just happens to you. It is something you create, not all at once, not in one big decision, but in the small choices you make every single day. The way you spend your time, the way you use your energy, the way you decide what matters and what doesn't. These choices are not random. They are building something. They are shaping your life, whether you're aware of it or not. And that leads to an important question. Are you designing your life or just drifting through it? Because there is a difference. Drifting feels automatic. You wake up, follow routines, respond to responsibilities, and move through your days without much intention. You do what needs to be done. You handle what comes your way. And while that may keep life moving, it doesn't necessarily make it meaningful. Designing, on the other hand, is intentional. It requires awareness. It requires clarity. It requires choice. It means you stop living by default and start living by design. Now, designing a life you love doesn't mean everything becomes perfect. It doesn't mean there are no challenges. It doesn't mean every day feels easy. But it does mean that your life reflects what truly matters to you. Not what others expect. Not what looks impressive. But what feels meaningful. So where do you begin? You begin with clarity. Before you can design anything, you need to know what you're creating. Take a moment and imagine your ideal life. Not in a vague way, but in detail. How do you want your days to feel? What kind of work do you want to do? What kind of environment do you want to live in? What kind of people do you want around you? This is not about fantasy. It's about direction. Because when you have a clear vision, your choices become easier. You know what to move toward and what to move away from. Without clarity, everything feels important. With clarity, you become selective. You start prioritizing what aligns with your vision. And that's where design begins. Now, once you have a vision, the next step is alignment. Because a vision alone doesn't change your life. Your actions do. You can imagine the life you want, but if your daily habits don't support it, nothing shifts. So ask yourself, do my current actions reflect the life I want to live? If not, what needs to change? Maybe it's how you spend your time. Maybe it's where you place your energy. Maybe it's the habits you've been repeating without question. Designing your life means adjusting these things. Not all at once, but step by step. You begin to make small changes that move you closer to your vision. You create routines that support your goals. You eliminate distractions that pull you away. You invest your time in what truly matters. These changes may seem small, but they are powerful. Because consistency builds momentum, and momentum creates transformation. Now, another key part of designing your life is ownership. You have to take responsibility for your direction. Not in a way that blames you for everything, but in a way that empowers you. Because if you believe your life is controlled by external factors, you will always feel limited. But when you recognize that your choices shape your path, you gain control. You realize that you are not stuck. You are deciding, even when it doesn't feel like it. Every time you say yes or no, every time you act or avoid, every time you choose comfort or growth, you are designing your life. So why not do it consciously? Why not take control of that process? Now, let's talk about something important. Designing a life you love requires patience, because meaningful change takes time. You won't wake up one day and suddenly be living your ideal life. It's built gradually, through consistent effort, through learning, through adjusting along the way. There will be moments of progress and moments of setback, moments where things feel clear and moments where they feel uncertain. But that's part of the journey. What matters is that you keep moving, that you stay committed to your vision, that you continue making choices that align with the life you want. Because over time, those choices add up. They create a shift in how you live, a shift in how you feel, a shift in what your life looks like. And slowly, what once felt like a distant idea becomes your reality. Now, here's something many people overlook. A life you love is not built only on achievement. It's built on experience. It's not just about reaching goals. It's about how you feel along the way. Do you feel fulfilled? Do you feel energized? Do you feel connected to what you're doing? These things matter. Because if you reach a goal but feel empty, something is missing. So as you design your life, don't just focus on outcomes. Focus on how you want to feel. And let that guide your choices. Because a life you love is not defined by external success. It's defined by internal satisfaction. Now let's bring it back to you. Take a moment and reflect. What does your ideal life look like? What are you currently doing that supports it? What are you doing that moves you away from it? These questions are not meant to pressure you. They are meant to guide you. Because the life you want is not out of reach. It's built through your daily decisions. So start where you are. Make one small change. Take one intentional step. Shift one habit. And then keep going. Because you don't need to have everything figured out. You just need to move in the right direction. And trust that each step will bring more clarity. So don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait for everything to align. Start now. Because your life is already being designed. The only question is, are you the one designing it? Or are you letting it be shaped by default? Choose intentionally. Choose consciously. Choose in a way that reflects your truth. Because you have the ability to create a life that feels right. A life that excites you. A life that fulfills you. A life that is truly yours. And when you do, you won't just exist. You will live fully, freely, on your terms. Conclusion. At the end of the day, there is one truth you cannot escape. This is your life. Not your parents. Not society's. Not the expectations placed on you by people who never dared to live freely themselves. Every moment you spend trying to fit into someone else's version of success is a moment you lose from your own story. But the moment you decide to take control, to think differently, act boldly, and trust yourself, you step into a life that feels real, powerful, and deeply fulfilling. Yes, it will be uncomfortable. Yes, people may not understand. But freedom has always come at the cost of approval. And it's worth it. Because a life lived on your own terms isn't just a dream, it's your responsibility. So stop waiting. Stop doubting. Stop asking for permission. Your life. Your rules. Now go live it. Thanks for listening. Do subscribe for more powerful audiobooks on personal development.